In the gritty heart of West Virginia's coal country, 1973 was a year of toil and tension. The town of Black Hollow thrived on the pulse of its mines, where men and women labored under the weight of earth and expectation. Rachel Carter, a miner's daughter with calloused hands and a stubborn heart, had grown up in the shadow of those tunnels. Her father, Amos Carter, had taught her the mine's secrets, its creaks' groans, the way the air shifted before a collapse. Rachel, now 26, was 8 months pregnant, her belly heavy with hope for a future she'd fought hard to build. But that hope had been crushed once before in a life she could scarcely believe was hers. In that past life, the Black Hollow mine had collapsed during a routine inspection, trapping Henry Dawson, the union leader who fought for workers' rights in an era when coal barons held sway. Desperate to save him, Rachel had run to her husband, Logan Hayes, the mine's safety supervisor. Tall, broad-shouldered, and once her hero Logan had saved her from a cave-in years before, sparking a love that blinded her to his flaws. But on that fateful day, Logan was elsewhere, tangled in the arms of his high school sweetheart Melissa Reed and her 8-year-old daughter Emily. Melissa, a delicate beauty with peach blossom eyes, had returned to Black Hollow after escaping an abusive marriage, and Logan, unable to resist, was helping her finalize her divorce. Rachel's pleas had pulled Logan from Melissa's side. He led the rescue, and his team dug through rubble to free Henry, earning him a promotion to regional safety director. The town hailed him as a hero, but the cost was steep. Melissa and Emily, left to drive home alone, perished in a car accident on the icy mountain roads. Logan's grief twisted into rage. He blamed Rachel, accusing her of jealousy, of dragging him away out of spite. "You couldn't stand seeing me with her," he'd snarled, his eyes cold as slate. "You wanted them gone." The truth was far uglier. As Rachel lay in labor, her body trembling with the promise of new life, Logan forced poison down her throat, a bitter liquid that burned through her veins. For Melissa, he whispered, his grip bruising her arms. "You and that bastard child will pay." The poison seared her organs, and her unborn son, carried for 10 months, dissolved into a crimson puddle before he could draw breath. Rachel's world faded to black, her last thought a scream of betrayal. That betrayal lingered like coal dust in the air, choking her memory. Rachel had grown up in Black Hollow, her childhood shaped by the mine's rhythm and her father's tales of survival. Amos, a wiry man with a quick laugh, had been her anchor until Black Lung claimed him when she was 16. Left alone, Rachel worked as a clerk at the mine's office, her sharp mind catching Logan's eye. His rescue during that long-ago cave-in had felt like fate, and their marriage 2 years prior had been her dream of stability. But Logan's heart belonged to Melissa, his white moonlight from high school, a cheerleader whose charm outshone Rachel's plain resilience. Rachel swallowed her pride, ignoring the whispers of Logan's lingering love, hoping her devotion would win him over. It hadn't. Now, as Rachel stood in the present, the memory of that poison and her lost child burned fresh. The mine collapse of 1973 was no mere accident, it was the crucible of her past life's ruin. But something had shifted. Fate, perhaps a divine hand moved by her suffering, had granted her a second chance. She was alive again, standing in Black Hollow on the day of the collapse, her body heavy with the same child she'd lost. The air was thick with the scent of coal and fear, and the distant rumble of the mine's failure echoed in her bones. Rachel's hands trembled as she clutched her coat, the weight of her past life pressing against her resolve. She wasn't the naive girl who'd begged Logan for help. This time she would act alone, rewrite her story, and reclaim her dignity. The town of Black Hollow, with its clapboard houses and weary miners, watched her now, unaware of the fire kindling within her. And if you're as gripped by Rachel's tale as we are, folks, hit that like button, drop a comment about what you think Rachel should do next, and subscribe to our channel for more stories of courage and redemption. Stay tuned, because Rachel's fight is just beginning. Rachel Carter stood frozen on the edge of Black Hollow's main street, the morning air sharp with the bite of autumn, 1973. The West Virginia hills loomed dark and heavy, their slopes scarred by decades of coal mining that fueled the nation's growth but broke the backs of its workers. A deafening boom shattered the quiet, and black smoke billowed from the mine's entrance half a mile away. Cries for help pierced the chaos, miners scrambling like ants from a crushed hill. Rachel's heart thudded, her hand instinctively cradling her swollen belly. She was 8 months pregnant, her body a map of aches, but her mind was sharp with the clarity of a second chance. She hadn't died. The poison, the pain, the loss of her son, they were real, yet here she stood, reborn on the very day the Black Hollow mine collapsed, trapping Henry Dawson, the union leader, who'd spent years battling for better wages and safer conditions. Rachel's past life flashed before her, running to Logan Hayes, her husband, begging him to save Henry, only to find him with Melissa Reed, his high school love, as they signed divorce papers for Melissa's escape from her abusive husband. That choice had cost Rachel everything: her child, her life, her trust. But fate, moved by her silent prayers in that final poisoned moment, had woven her soul into this day, a divine spark granting her the power to rewrite her story. Rachel's father, Amos, had taught her the mine's secrets before Black Lung stole him away. She knew the tunnel's twists, the warning hum of shifting rock, the narrow window for rescue. 72 hours before air ran thin and hope faded. Logan, the mine's safety supervisor, should have been leading the charge, but Rachel knew he was with Melissa, chasing a love that had always eclipsed her. She wouldn't make the same mistake twice. Her hands steadied as she grabbed a flashlight, a canteen, and a sack of rations from her truck parked near the mine's office, where she still worked as a clerk. The weight of her pregnancy slowed her, but her resolve burned brighter than the coal fires rumored to smolder underground. "Rachel, what the hell are you doing?" shouted Tom Bradley, the grizzled foreman, as she strode toward the mine's entrance. His face, lined from years underground, was pale with panic. Miners milled around, some grabbing tools, others frozen in fear. The air was thick with dust and the ground trembled with aftershocks. "Get Daniel Ward," Rachel called back, her voice firm despite the tremor in her chest. "He's the deputy supervisor. Tell him Henry's in Tunnel 13. I'm going in." Daniel, a quiet man who'd served with Logan in the army, was loyal but steady, contrasting her husband's reckless charm. Rachel trusted him to act where Logan wouldn't. Tom gaped, his eyes flicking to her belly. "You're pregnant, Rachel. Let the crew handle it," but she was already moving, her boots crunching on gravel as she plunged into the mine's maw. The darkness swallowed her, the air growing damp and heavy with the scent of earth and coal. Her flashlight danced across jagged walls, and the faint cries from deeper within guided her steps. She navigated by memory, her father's lessons a lifeline. Stay low. Watch the roof, listen for the rocks whisper. Tunnel 13 was a death trap, its supports old and creaking. But Henry was there, and Rachel wouldn't let history repeat itself. She found him pinned under a slab of rock, his leg crushed, his face ashen but alive. Henry Dawson, 52, was a pillar in Black Hollow, a man who'd lost his wife and son to illness, but fought for every miner like family. "Rachel," he rasped, shock in his eyes. "What are you doing here?" "Saving you," she said, kneeling beside him. Her hands, rough from years of handling ledgers and mending her own clothes, worked to shift the debris. Pain shot through her back, but she gritted her teeth, freeing Henry's leg enough to drag him to a safer corner. She handed him her canteen and a biscuit from her rations. "My dad taught me how to survive a collapse. We've got enough for 2 days. Help's coming." Henry's eyes softened, gratitude mixing with concern. "You're risking too much, girl." But Rachel shook her head, her resolve ironclad. She wouldn't let Logan claim the glory this time, nor let Melissa and Emily twist her fate again. The mine groaned around them, a reminder of the ticking clock. Rachel's rebirth wasn't just a chance, but a mandate to reclaim her life, no matter the cost. The Black Hollow mine was a beast. Its tunnels were a labyrinth of shadow and stone that had swallowed men whole for generations. In 1973, West Virginia's coal industry was the lifeblood of towns like Black Hollow, but it was a cruel master, claiming lives with cave-ins and Black Lung. Rachel Carter, 8 months pregnant and fueled by the fire of her reborn resolve, plunged into the mine's gaping mouth, her flashlight cutting through the suffocating darkness. The air was thick with dust, the scent of damp earth and coal clinging to her skin. Her father, Amos Carter, had walked these tunnels, teaching her their secrets before disease stole him away. Those lessons were her guide as she navigated Tunnel 13 to save Henry Dawson, the Union leader trapped in the collapse. Rachel's boots crunched against loose gravel, each step a defiance of the fear clawing at her chest. Her belly, heavy with her unborn son, slowed her, but her mind was sharp, replaying her father's words. "Listen to the rock, Rachel. It'll tell you when it's gonna give." The mine groaned, a low rumble that vibrated through her bones, but she pressed on her flashlight beam, dancing across jagged walls. Cries for help echoed faintly, guiding her deeper into the beast's belly. She'd told Tom Bradley, the foreman, to fetch Daniel Ward, the deputy supervisor she trusted, to rally a rescue team. Logan Hayes, her husband, and the mine's safety supervisor, was nowhere to be found, likely with Melissa Reed, his high school love chasing a future that didn't include Rachel. The collapse had struck during Henry Dawson's inspection. A routine check turned deadly when the old supports in Tunnel 13 gave way. Henry, a grizzled man of 52, was Black Hollow's fiercest advocate, pushing for safety reforms in an era when coal companies cut corners to feed America's energy hunger. Rachel found him pinned under a slab of rock, his leg crushed, his face pale but defiant. "Rachel," he rasped, his voice hoarse with pain, "you shouldn't be here, not in your condition." "No choice, Henry," she said, kneeling beside him. Her hands, toughened from years of mending clothes and scrubbing floors, worked to shift the debris. Pain shot through her back, her pregnancy making every movement a struggle, but she gritted her teeth, leveraging the rock until Henry's leg was free. Blood seeped from his thigh, and she tore a strip from her jacket to bind it, her fingers steady despite the mine's oppressive weight. "My dad taught me how to survive down here. We've got a chance." She handed him her canteen and a biscuit from the rations she'd grabbed, a habit born from Amos's insistence on always being prepared. Henry took them, his eyes flickering with gratitude and concern. He said, "You're risking too much," his voice soft but firm, like the father Rachel had lost. Henry had no family left. His wife and son had been taken by illness years ago, and his fight for the miners was his way of filling that void. Rachel saw that same resolve in his gaze, which fueled her own. She said, "We've got 72 hours, her voice steady despite the mine's creaks. "That's the window before the air turns bad. I sent Tom for Daniel Ward. He'll bring the crew." She moved Henry to a safer corner away from the crumbling roof and scanned the tunnel for a ventilation shaft. Her father had drilled it into her air, was life in a collapse. The mine was a maze, but Rachel's memory of its layout, honed by years of listening to Amos's stories, guided her. She could almost hear his rough but warm voice urging her on. The darkness pressed in the air, growing thinner as dust clogged her lungs. Rachel's flashlight flickered, and she shook it, her heart racing. The cries from other trapped miners had faded, leaving only Henry's ragged breathing beside her. She spoke to keep him awake, sharing stories of her childhood, how Amos would bring her to the mine's edge, pointing out the stars above the hills, promising her a life beyond coal dust. Those dreams had led her to Logan, whose heroism during a cave-in had won her heart. But his love for Melissa, a cheerleader who'd married young to escape poverty only to face abuse, had cast Rachel as a stand-in, her devotion a poor substitute for his past. Rachel's hands trembled as she checked Henry's pulse, her body aching under the strain. The mine was a tomb, but she wouldn't let it claim them. She had been reborn for this moment, a divine spark igniting her second chance to right the wrongs of her past life. Logan's betrayal, Melissa's manipulations, the loss of her child, they wouldn't define her now. She was Amos Carter's daughter, and she would fight like hell to bring Henry out alive. The Black Hollow mine was a living beast, its tunnels shifting and groaning as if angered by Rachel Carter's defiance. In 1973, West Virginia's miners faced death daily, their lives cheap in the eyes of coal barons chasing profit. 8 months pregnant and driven by her reborn purpose, Rachel freed Henry Dawson, the union leader, from a collapsed tunnel. Now she guided him toward a ventilation shaft, the key to their survival. Her flashlight cast weak beams across the jagged walls, the air thick with coal dust that stung her eyes and throat. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "Find the air, Rachel. It's your lifeline." But the mine was unforgiving, and every step tested her strength. Henry leaned heavily on her, his crushed leg dragging his face etched with pain. "You're too stubborn for your own good," he muttered, his voice weak but warm. Rachel managed a faint smile, her hands steady as she supported him. Her belly ached, the weight of her unborn son, a constant reminder of what she'd lost in her past life, poisoned by her husband Logan Hayes for a woman he loved more. That betrayal fueled her now, but so did her father's legacy. Amos Carter had survived collapses, teaching Rachel to read the mine's warnings, and she clung to that knowledge like a prayer. The tunnel shook, a low rumble signaling danger. Rachel's heart pounded as she scanned for the ventilation shaft, its promise of air, their only hope. Her flashlight caught a faint glint of metal, a rusted grate 30 yards away. There, she said, guiding Henry forward. Her back screamed with pain, her pregnancy making each step a battle, but she pushed on, her resolve unbreakable. The mine's walls seemed to close in the air, growing thinner, and Henry's breathing grew shallow. She pressed the canteen to his lips, urging him to drink, her own throat parched, but her focus unwavering. Then it came, a deafening crack, like the earth splitting open. A boulder broke free from the ceiling, tumoring toward them. "Watch out!" Henry shouted, his voice hoarse with alarm. Rachel had no time to think. Instinct took over, and she shoved Henry aside, her body shielding him as the rock struck. Pain exploded in her abdomen, a searing, bone-deep agony that stole her breath. She collapsed, clutching her belly, warm blood pooling beneath her. Her baby, the child she'd carried for 8 months, the hope she'd fought for, was slipping away. Rachel bit her lip to stifle a scream, knowing any sound could trigger another collapse. Tears mixed with dust on her face, but she crawled to Henry, checking his pulse. He was alive, dazed, but breathing propped against the tunnel wall. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice trembling but firm. She tore another strip from her jacket, pressing it against her abdomen to slow the bleeding, but the pain was relentless, a cruel echo of her past life's loss. Her son was gone, just as he had been before, but Rachel refused to break. She had to keep Henry alive to prove her second chance wasn't in vain. Hours crawled by, and the mine was a suffocating prison. Rachel's rations dwindled, but she gave the last biscuit to Henry, her own hunger secondary. She spoke to keep him conscious, recounting her father's stories of Black Hollow's mines, how workers struck in '69 for better wages, only to face company thugs. Henry nodded weakly, his own history intertwined with those fights. He'd lost his family to poverty's toll, yet he poured his grief into protecting miners like Rachel's father. "You're like Amos," he murmured, "too damn brave." Rachel's flashlight dimmed, her strength fading with the blood seeping from her wound. She clung to the thought of Daniel Ward, the deputy supervisor she'd sent for. Daniel, a former army buddy of Logan's, was steady where her husband was reckless, his quiet respect contrasting with Logan's arrogance. She trusted him to find them, to break through the rubble before the 72-hour window closed. The mine groaned again, dust raining down, but Rachel held fast, her father's lessons and her reborn resolve anchoring her against despair. As the second day dawned, a faint scraping echoed through the tunnel. Light pierced the darkness, and voices called out Daniel's rescue team had reached the ventilation shaft. Rachel's vision blurred, her body giving out as hands pulled her and Henry free. She collapsed, the world fading, but not before Henry gripped her hand, his voice thick with gratitude. "You saved me, Rachel. I won't forget." Her last thought, as darkness claimed her, was of her lost child and the fight she still had left. The hospital in Black Hollow, West Virginia, was a squat brick building, its walls stained with the grime of coal dust that clung to everything in 1973. Rachel Carter lay in a sterile bed, her body weak from blood loss, her heart heavy with the fresh wound of her miscarriage. The mine collapse had nearly claimed her, but she had saved Henry Dawson, the union leader, at the cost of her unborn son. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow on her pale face, but Rachel's eyes burned with a quiet fire, her reborn resolve unbroken despite the pain. She had entered the mine alone, defying her husband Logan Hayes' absence, and now she faced the aftermath in a town where miners' lives were as expendable as the coal they dug. Daniel Ward, the deputy supervisor, sat by her bedside, his broad shoulders hunched with worry. A former army buddy of Logan's, Daniel was a steady presence, his dark eyes reflecting a loyalty that contrasted with Logan's recklessness. He had led the rescue team that pulled Rachel and Henry from Tunnel 13, breaking through the ventilation shaft just as her strength gave out. Now in the hospital's dim room, he watched over her, his calloused hands clasped tightly. "You did something incredible, Rachel," he said softly, his voice rough from hours of shouting orders in the mine. "Henry's alive because of you." Rachel managed a weak nod, her throat tight with grief. The loss of her child was a raw wound echoing the poison Logan had forced on her in her past life. Yet she clung to the memory of her father, Amos Carter, whose lessons had guided her through the mine. Amos, a wiry miner with a quick laugh, had died of black lung when Rachel was 16, leaving her to navigate Black Hollow's harsh world alone. She'd worked as a clerk in the mine's office, her sharp mind catching Logan's eye during a cave-in years ago when he pulled her from danger. That heroism had sparked her love, but his heart belonged to Melissa Reed, his high school sweetheart who'd fled an abusive marriage, leaving Rachel to play second fiddle. Henry Dawson, bandaged but alive, hobbled into the room on crutches, his crushed leg a testament to the mine's brutality. At 52, Henry was a pillar of Black Hollow, a union leader who'd fought for safer conditions in an era when coal companies prioritized profit over lives. His own family, wife and son, had been lost to tuberculosis a decade ago, a casualty of the poverty that plagued mining towns. Henry's grief had fueled his crusade, and now seeing Rachel's sacrifice, he felt a paternal bond. "Rachel," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you risked everything for me. I owe you my life." He sat beside her, his weathered hand gripping hers. "I'm making you my goddaughter," he declared, his tone firm but warm. "No one in Black Hollow will lay a finger on you while I'm around. I promise you that." His words carried the weight of his authority earned through years of battling coal barons and rallying miners during strikes like the one in '69 that had shaken the region. Rachel's eyes welled the first warmth she'd felt since her father's death. Henry's vow was a lifeline, a reminder that she wasn't alone in this second chance granted by a divine spark, a force she couldn't name but felt in her bones. Daniel glanced at Henry, then back at Rachel. "I sent for Logan," he said, his voice tight. "Told him you're hurt, that you lost the baby. He should be here." Rachel's heart sank. She knew Logan was with Melissa, likely at the county courthouse, finalizing her divorce from a husband who'd left her bruised and broken. Melissa's desperation for a new life had drawn Logan in, but Rachel had seen the truth in her past life. His love for Melissa was an obsession that led him to poison Rachel for a tragedy he blamed on her. The door creaked open, and Tom Bradley, the foreman, shuffled in, his face grim. "Henry, I told Logan," he said, avoiding Rachel's gaze. He wouldn't come," said Rachel's, faking it, causing trouble. "He's with that Reed woman." Henry's face darkened, his grip tightening on his crutches. In Black Hollow, where community was forged in the mines, shared dangers, abandoning a wife in crisis was unthinkable. "He's the safety supervisor," Henry growled. His job was to be there, not chasing some skirt while his wife bled out. Rachel's chest ached, not from surprise but from the weight of Logan's betrayal. In her past life, she'd run to him during the collapse, begging for help, only to face his scorn later. He'd accused her of jealousy when Melissa and her daughter Emily died in a car accident, then killed her and her child in revenge. Now reborn Rachel had bypassed him, saving Henry herself, but the cost her baby tore at her soul. She closed her eyes, picturing Amos, his voice urging her to keep fighting. Henry's promise and Daniel's presence anchored her, but the road ahead was fraught with pain. Rachel Carter lay in the Black Hollow Hospital, her body bruised and broken, her heart hollowed by the loss of her unborn son. The year was 1973, and West Virginia's coal towns were battlegrounds where miners fought for survival against collapsing tunnels and ruthless companies. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting shadows on the cracked linoleum floor, a stark reminder of the town's poverty. Rachel's sacrifice in the mine had saved Henry Dawson, the Union leader, but the boulder that struck her had taken her child a wound that echoed her past life's tragedy. Reborn by a divine spark, she was determined to rewrite her fate. But Logan Hayes, her husband, was nowhere to be found. Henry Dawson sat by her bed, his crutches propped against the wall, his crushed leg bandaged, but his spirit fierce. A Union leader who'd lost his family to poverty's toll, Henry had dedicated his life to protecting miners like Rachel's father, Amos Carter. His gratitude for Rachel's courage had forged a bond, and his vow to be her godfather was a promise rooted in shared loss. "Logan's got no excuse," Henry said, his voice low with anger. "He's the safety supervisor. He should have been in that mine, not you." Daniel Ward, the deputy supervisor, stood near the window, his jaw tight. A quiet man with a soldier's discipline, Daniel had served with Logan in the army, their bond forged in Vietnam's jungles. But where Logan was brash, Daniel was steady, his loyalty to Black Hollow's miners unwavering. He'd led the rescue that saved Rachel and Henry, his team digging through rubble to reach the ventilation shaft. His dark eyes flicked to Rachel, worry etched into his face. "I told Tom to find Logan," he said. "He's got to know you're hurt, Rachel, that you lost the baby." Rachel's hands clenched the thin hospital blanket, her grief a heavy stone in her chest. She wasn't surprised by Logan's absence. She'd run to him during the collapse in her past life, interrupting his time with Melissa Reed, his high school sweetheart. Melissa, a delicate beauty who'd married young to escape poverty, had fled an abusive husband, and Logan saw himself as her savior. Rachel, a miner's daughter who'd worked as a clerk to survive after Amos's death, had loved Logan, fiercely drawn to his heroism during a cave-in years ago. But his heart belonged to Melissa, and his neglect had cost Rachel everything: her child, her life, her trust. The door swung open, and Tom Bradley, the foreman, stepped in his boots, scuffing the floor. His face was drawn, his eyes avoiding Rachel's. "Henry, I found Logan," he said, his voice low. "He's at the courthouse with Melissa Reed signing her divorce papers. I told him Rachel's in bad shape, that she lost the baby. He..." he laughed. Said she's pulling a stunt to get attention. Told me to tell her to stop causing trouble. Henry's face turned thunderous, his knuckles white around his crutches. He laughed, he roared, his voice echoing in the small room. His wife's dying, and he's playing house with another woman. What kind of man abandons his post during a collapse in Black Hollow where miners relied on each other like family? Logan's betrayal was a sin against the community's code. The 1969 strike had taught them unity when workers faced company goons to demand better wages. Logan's absence spat on that legacy. Rachel's eyes burned with tears, but she forced them back. In her past life, Logan's neglect had been the prelude to his cruelty. After saving Henry, he'd been promoted, but Melissa and her daughter Emily died in a car accident. Blaming Rachel, he'd poisoned her, his hands choking her as he snarled, "You were jealous of her." Now reborn Rachel had acted alone, ensuring Henry's survival without Logan's help. But the loss of her child was a fresh scar, and Logan's dismissal cut deeper than she'd expected. She thought of Amos, who'd raised her to be tough to face the mine's dangers with grit. Growing up, she'd helped him polish his boots, listening to tales of survival under the stars. After his death, she'd taken a job at the mine's office, her quick math and neat handwriting earning her a place. Logan's rescue during a cave-in had felt like destiny, but his love for Melissa, who'd charmed him in high school with her fragile beauty, had overshadowed their marriage. Melissa's abusive past had made her desperate, and Logan's devotion to her left, Rachel scraping by her dowry spent on household bills while he bought Melissa jewelry. Rachel Henry said, his voice softening, "You're not alone. I meant what I said, you're my goddaughter now. I'll make sure Logan answers for this." His promise, backed by his union authority, was a shield against the pain. Daniel nodded, his quiet strength a steady presence. Rachel closed her eyes, her body weak, but her mind clear. The divine spark that had reborn her wasn't just a chance, it was a call to fight to reclaim her life from Logan's betrayal and build a future where she wasn't a shadow. The Black Hollow hospital room was a stark cage of white walls and antiseptic scent, its cracked linoleum floor a testament to the town's hardscrabble life in 1973. Rachel Carter lay propped against thin pillows, her body frail from the miscarriage that had stolen her unborn son in the mine's collapse. The pain was a dull ache now, but her heart carried a heavier wound carved by the betrayal of her husband, Logan Hayes. Reborn by a divine spark, Rachel had saved Henry Dawson, the union leader, defying Logan's absence, but the cost had been her child. Now, in the quiet of the hospital, a new threat emerged, small but venomous, in the form of Emily Reed, the 8-year-old daughter of Logan's mistress, Melissa. Rachel's eyes were heavy, her mind drifting to her father, Amos Carter, whose lessons had guided her through the mine. A miner's daughter, she'd grown up in Black Hollow's shadow, her childhood marked by Amos's stories of survival and the community's struggles against coal barons. After his death from black lung, Rachel had worked as a clerk in the mine's office, her neat handwriting and quick math keeping her afloat. Logan's rescue during a cave-in had won her heart, but his love for Melissa, a high school beauty who'd fled an abusive marriage, had relegated Rachel to a shadow in her own home. The memory of her past life, Logan's poison, her child's death, steeled her resolve, but the hospital's sterile air felt suffocating. The door creaked open, and Emily stepped in, clutching a bouquet of lilies, their sickly sweet scent hitting Rachel like a punch. In her past life, Emily had used those flowers deliberately, knowing Rachel's severe allergy, triggering a reaction that caused her first miscarriage. Now the girl's peach blossom eyes, like her mother's, gleamed with calculated malice. "Miss Rachel," Emily said, her voice sugary but sharp, "I brought these for you. Lilies are so pretty, aren't they?" She stepped closer, waving the bouquet under Rachel's nose, the pollen tightening her throat. Rachel's hands clenched the blanket, her grief igniting into fury. She remembered the past life's agony hives, a swollen throat crawling to the hospital as Emily smirked. The girl had been coached by Logan, who saw Rachel's suffering as a path to clear for Melissa. Rachel said, "Get those away from me," her voice low but firm, pushing the flowers aside. Emily's smile widened, her small hand shoving the lilies closer. "Why, Miss Rachel? Don't you like them? Daddy Logan says you're just jealous of Mommy. He told me to make you sick, said it'd be better if you were gone." The words cut deeper than the pain in Rachel's abdomen. Logan's betrayal, already a wound, now festered with the revelation of his cruelty through a child. Emily's taunt continued, her voice dripping with scorn. "Mommy's getting her divorce today, and Daddy Logan's gonna marry her. You're just in the way, a nobody from the hills. He says you're tacky, uneducated. Why don't you disappear?" she giggled, twirling a lily, her innocence a mask for malice. Rachel's vision blurred, not from allergies but from rage. She'd endured Logan's neglect, Melissa's arrogance, but this a child weaponized against her was too much. Her hand lashed out, slapping Emily's cheek with a sharp crack. The girl froze, stunned, then clutched her face, her eyes wide with shock. "You hit me!" she shrieked, tears welling for effect. "Daddy Logan won't let you get away with this. You're nothing but a homewrecker." Henry Dawson, standing unnoticed by the door, had heard everything. His crutches clacked as he stepped forward, his face dark with fury. The union leader, a man who'd lost his family to poverty and fought for Black Hollow's miners, was no stranger to injustice. In 1973, when coal companies crushed workers' spirits, Henry's resolve was ironclad. "Enough," he growled, his voice cutting through Emily's wails. "You don't speak to my goddaughter like that." He turned to Daniel Ward, the deputy supervisor lingering nearby. "Get her out of here." Daniel, his soldier's frame tense, grabbed Emily's arm gently but firmly, prying the lilies from her hands. His loyalty to Rachel, born from years working alongside Logan, had shifted in the mine's aftermath. He'd seen Rachel's courage, sacrifice, and pain. He said, "Let's go, kid," his voice low but stern, leading Emily toward the door. The girl's screams faded down the hall, but Rachel's heart pounded the sting of Emily's words, mingling with the grief of her lost child. Henry sat beside her, his weathered hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone, Rachel," he said, his tone softening. "I meant what I said. You're family now. No one, not Logan, not that girl, will hurt you while I'm here." Rachel's eyes welled the warmth of his promise, a balm against her wounds. She was Amos Carter's daughter, reborn to fight, and Henry's support was a shield in a town where betrayal cut deep. The Black Hollow hospital room was a cold sanctuary, its walls echoing the hardship of a 1973 West Virginia coal town. Rachel Carter lay in her bed, her body battered from the mine collapse that had taken her unborn son, her spirit shaken by Emily Reed's venomous taunts. The 8-year-old's lilies, a deliberate weapon from Rachel's past life, had nearly triggered another allergic reaction, but Rachel's slap had silenced the girl's malice. Now the room was quiet, save for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant clatter of nurses. Rachel's grief was a heavy stone, but her reborn resolve, sparked by a divine force, burned brighter than ever. She was done being Logan Hayes' shadow, done enduring his betrayal for the sake of a love that was never hers. Henry Dawson stood by her bedside, his crutches a reminder of the mine's brutality. At 52, the union leader was a weathered oak, his face lined from years fighting for Black Hollow's miners. He'd lost his wife and son to tuberculosis, a casualty of the poverty that gripped coal country, and his crusade for safer mines was his way of honoring their memory. Rachel's sacrifice, risking her life to save him, had forged a bond deeper than blood. When he heard Emily's cruel words accusing Rachel of jealousy and revealing Logan's plot to harm her, Henry's fury was a storm ready to break. Henry said the girl's got no right, his voice low but seething. "And Logan encouraging a child to hurt you? He's no man, no supervisor." He turned to Daniel Ward, the deputy supervisor who'd just returned after escorting Emily out. "Daniel, get me the union board. Logan's done as safety supervisor. I'm naming you acting head effective now." His authority, earned through battles like the 1969 strike when miners faced company violence, was absolute in Black Hollow. Daniel nodded, his dark eyes steady but troubled. A former army comrade of Logan's, he'd once admired his friend's charisma, but Logan's neglect had eroded that respect. Daniel had led the rescue that saved Rachel and Henry, his team's precision cutting through the mine's rubble. Standing in the hospital's dim light, he saw Rachel's pain and felt a quiet duty to protect her. "I'll handle it, Henry," he said, his voice firm. "Logan's got no place leading after this." Rachel's chest tightened, not from pain but from the weight of Henry's words. In her past life, Logan had used his rescue of Henry to climb the ranks only to poison her when Melissa and Emily died in a car accident. Reborn. Rachel had bypassed him, saving Henry herself, but Logan's absence and Emily's cruelty proved his heart was still with Melissa. Melissa, who'd fled an abusive marriage, had clung to Logan's promises of a better life, her desperation blinding her to the cost. Rachel, a miner's daughter who'd scraped by after Amos's death, had loved Logan since his heroic rescue years ago, but that love was now ash. "Rachel," Henry said, sitting beside her, his voice softening, "you're my goddaughter now. I lost my family, but you've given me something to fight for. No one will hurt you again. not Logan, that girl, or anyone. His hand rested on hers, warm and steady, like Amos's had been when she was a girl, listening to his stories under the stars. Henry's promise was a beacon in Black Hollow, where coal dust coated dreams. The town's miners, bound by shared hardship, revered him, and his word carried weight beyond the hospital walls. Rachel's eyes welled, but she held back tears, her resolve hardening. She thought of her father Amos, who'd taught her to face the mine's dangers with grit. After his death, she'd worked as a clerk, and her dowry was spent on household bills while Logan lavished Melissa with gifts. In her past life, Emily's lilies had caused a miscarriage, and Logan's poison had ended her life. Now reborn, Rachel felt the divine spark urging her forward. "Thank you, Henry," she whispered, her voice steady despite her grief. "I want to be free of him." Henry nodded, his eyes fierce with determination. "You will be. Logan's negligence is a betrayal of every miner in this town. He abandoned his post and left you to die. I'll see him answer for it." He stood, his crutches clacking, and turned to Daniel. "Find Logan. Tell him he's out. If he doesn't show his face, I'll drag him here myself." Daniel gave a curt nod, his soldier's discipline masking the anger simmering beneath. As the door closed behind Daniel, Rachel stared at the ceiling, the hospital's hum a faint echo of the mine's groans. Black Hollow was a town forged in struggle, its people bound by the coal that sustained and destroyed them. Rachel was Amos Carter's daughter, reborn to fight, and Henry's vow was her shield. But Logan's betrayal and the shadow of Melissa and Emily loomed large. The fight wasn't over, and Rachel knew the worst was yet to come. The Black Hollow hospital room was a cold fortress, its sterile walls and flickering fluorescent lights a stark contrast to the raw chaos of West Virginia's coal mines in 1973. Rachel Carter lay in her hospital bed, her body weakened from the miscarriage that had claimed her unborn son during the mine collapse. Her heart, though, burned with a reborn resolve, a divine spark that had given her a second chance to rewrite her tragic past. She had saved Henry Dawson, the union leader, defying her husband Logan Hayes' absence, but the cost had been immense. Now, as Henry's vow to protect her as his goddaughter, and Daniel Ward's quiet loyalty offered solace, a storm was brewing. Logan was coming. Rachel's mind churned with memories of her past life when Logan, the mine's safety supervisor, had poisoned her to avenge his mistress Melissa Reed and her daughter Emily after they died in a car accident. Reborn. Rachel had acted alone, ensuring Henry's survival without Logan's help, but Emily's cruel taunts and Lily's had reopened old wounds. Rachel was Amos Carter's daughter, raised in Black Hollow's gritty embrace, her childhood shaped by her father's tales of survival and the town's battles against coal barons. After Amos's death from black lung, she'd worked as a clerk, her dowry drained on household bills while Logan spent on Melissa. That betrayal fueled her now, but the hospital's quiet felt like the calm before a cave-in. The door slammed open, and Logan stormed in his broad frame, filling the room with menace. His eyes, once charming, were wild with rage, his uniform rumpled from hours at the courthouse with Melissa. "You cheating bastard!" He roared, his gaze darting between Rachel and Daniel, who stood protectively nearby. "You went to Henry, didn't you? Got me fired, stole my job, and now you're here cozying up with my wife." His fist lashed out, catching Daniel's jaw, sending him stumbling. Before Rachel could react, Logan's hand struck her cheek, a sharp sting that swelled instantly. Rachel's vision blurred, not from pain, but from the weight of Logan's betrayal. She'd loved him since he saved her from a cave-in, his heroism blinding her to his obsession with Melissa, a high school sweetheart who'd fled an abusive marriage. In her past life, Logan's accusations of jealousy had led to poison. Now his violence was raw and immediate. Daniel recovered his soldier's instincts, kicking in and grabbed Logan's wrist, his face dark with fury. "Watch yourself, Logan," he growled, his voice low but lethal. "You're out of line." Logan sneered, yanking his arm free. "Out of line. You're in my wife's room alone. What's everyone gonna think, huh?" "And you, Rachel," he spat, turning to her. "You think you can ruin me? Report me to Henry, get me sacked, I'll make you pay." His hand rose again, but Rachel's voice cut through, calm and cold as steel. "I'm not your wife anymore, Logan," she said, pulling divorce papers from under her pillow. She'd had them drawn up after Emily's Lily incident in her past life when the girl's malice cost her first child. Rachel had stayed for the baby she carried, now hoping Logan might change, but his absence during the collapse had killed that hope and their son. "You left me to die in that mine while you were with Melissa. Our baby's gone because of you. Sign these and let me go." Logan froze his eyes, locking on the papers, his arrogance faltering. Rachel's calm resolve unnerved him starkly, contrasting the desperate girl he'd married. She was Amos Carter's daughter, forged in Black Hollow's hardships, where miners struck in '69 for better wages facing company thugs. Her dowry had kept their home running, while Logan bought Melissa jewelry, his love for her rooted in a past Rachel could never touch. "You're bluffing," he muttered, but his voice wavered. Before Rachel could respond, Melissa burst in Emily in her arms, both tear-streaked. Like Emily's, Melissa's delicate features were flushed with panic. "Logan, please don't listen to her," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "She's twisting everything. I brought Emily to apologize, but Rachel's trying to tear us apart." Emily sobbed, clutching her mother, her earlier malice hidden behind a mask of innocence. "Miss Rachel hit me," she whimpered, pointing to her cheek. "She hates us." Logan's eyes softened, his anger redirected to Rachel. "You hit a kid," he snarled, stepping toward her. "You're disgusting, Rachel. A nobody from the hills thinking you can play me." He reached for her, but Daniel stepped between them, his frame a wall. "Back off, Logan," he said, his voice a low warning. "You're done here." The tension snapped as Logan pulled a gun from his belt, his hand shaking but his eyes wild. "You ruined my career, Rachel," he hissed, pressing the barrel to her forehead. "You and your lover boy slandering me to Henry. You're going to hell for this." Rachel's heart pounded, but she met his gaze unafraid. She'd faced death before, and this time she wasn't alone. A gunshot rang out, not from Logan, but from a guard at the door, hitting Logan's arm. He cried out, dropping the gun, which Daniel seized instantly. Henry hobbled in his face, a mask of fury, his crutches clacking. "Logan Hayes," he thundered, "you're a disgrace." Rachel exhaled, her body trembling, but her spirit unbroken. She was free of Logan's shadow, but the fight was far from over. The Black Hollow hospital room was a battleground, its sterile air thick with the aftermath of Logan Hayes' violence. Rachel Carter sat upright in her bed, her cheeks stinging from Logan's slap, her heart steady, despite the gun he'd pressed to her forehead moments ago. The year was 1973, and West Virginia's coal towns were arenas of struggle where miners like Rachel's father, Amos Carter, had fought for survival against collapsing tunnels and greedy companies. Reborn by a divine spark, Rachel had saved Henry Dawson, the Union leader, at the cost of her unborn son, defying Logan's absence. Now, as Logan clutched his wounded arm, felled by a guard's shot, Henry's presence loomed like a storm ready to break. Henry Dawson glared at Logan with an icy stare, his crutches steady despite his crushed leg. A Union leader who'd lost his family to poverty's toll, Henry's life was dedicated to Black Hollow's miners, his battles against coal barons legendary. Rachel's sacrifice had made her his goddaughter, and Logan's betrayal, abandoning his post, attacking his wife, was a personal affront. "Logan Hayes," Henry said, his voice cold as the mine's depths, "you were supposed to protect this town. Instead, you left Rachel to die," raised a hand against her, and pulled a gun. "You're no leader." Logan, blood seeping through his sleeve, dropped to his knees, his arrogance shattered. "Henry, please," he stammered. "I didn't mean it. Rachel's lying, twisting everything to ruin me." His eyes darted to Melissa Reed, who stood frozen with Emily, her delicate features pale with fear. Melissa, Logan's high school sweetheart, had fled an abusive marriage, her desperation for a new life binding her to Logan. Rachel, a miner's daughter who'd worked as a clerk after Amos's death, had been a stand-in, her dowry spent while Logan lavished Melissa with gifts. Henry slammed a thick folder onto the bed, its pages spilling evidence of Logan's crimes. "You think I came to Black Hollow to inspect the mine?" he growled. "We've been watching you. Your salary's $300 a month yet. You're spending thousands, designer dresses for Melissa, a pearl necklace for Emily, a new Chevy. Where's the money coming from?" Logan's face paled, his mouth opening, but no words escaping. Henry pressed on, his voice cutting like a pickaxe. "We traced it. You've been stealing coal from the state mine, selling it to foreign buyers. That's treason, Logan, against the nation that pays you." Rachel's breath caught the scale of Logan's betrayal, stunning her. In her past life, he'd poisoned her, blaming her for Melissa's death, but this was worse. He'd betrayed Black Hollow, the town that relied on the mine's coal to survive. The 1969 strike had taught miners unity, but Logan's greed spat on that legacy. Standing guard with the seized gun, Daniel Ward shook his head, his loyalty to Logan eroded by years of watching him neglect Rachel. Daniel, a former army buddy, admired Logan's charm, but his reckless abandonment during the collapse had shifted Daniel's allegiance. Logan's eyes darted to Melissa, desperation replacing his bravado. It was her, he shouted, pointing a trembling finger. Melissa pushed me, saying the foreign buyers would pay big for coal. I was under pressure. Henry, I didn't mean to. Melissa gasped, clutching Emily, her pearl necklace gleaming a gift from Logan's stolen funds. You liar, she cried, her voice breaking. You gave me everything willingly. Please don't drag me into this. Emily sobbed, confused, her earlier malice buried under fear. Henry's face darkened, his patience gone. Enough, he barked. Every transaction, every connection between you two goes to the military court. You stole from the nation, Logan, and you, Melissa, profited from it. He turned to Daniel. Get them out. I want a full investigation now. Daniel nodded, his soldier's discipline masking his disgust. He signaled the guards who seized Logan and Melissa, their protests echoing as they were dragged down the hall. Emily clung to her mother, her cries fading into the hospital's hum. Rachel watched, her heart a mix of relief and sorrow. In her past life, Logan's betrayal had ended her life. Now his downfall was justice, but it couldn't bring back her child. She thought of Amos, who'd raised her to face hardship with grit, his stories of Black Hollow's resilience her anchor. Growing up, she'd helped him polish his boots, dreaming of a life beyond coal dust. After his death, she'd scraped by her love for Logan, a fleeting hope crushed by his obsession with Melissa. Henry's hand rested on her shoulder, his voice soft. It's over, Rachel. You're free. She nodded, her eyes dry, but her resolve firm. The divine spark that had reborn her was a call to rebuild, not just to survive. Black Hollow's miners, bound by shared struggle, would rally behind her, and Henry's vow was her shield. But as Logan's screams faded, Rachel knew her fight wasn't done. Her healing, her future lay ahead. The Black Hollow hospital room, with its cracked linoleum and antiseptic sting, was a quiet battlefield in the fading light of a 1973 West Virginia evening. Rachel Carter sat in her bed, her body bruised from the mine collapse that had claimed her unborn son, her cheek still tender from Logan Hayes' slap. The air was heavy with the weight of justice unfolding, a justice Rachel had fought for in her reborn life, sparked by a divine force that had given her a second chance. Logan, her husband, and his mistress Melissa Reed had been dragged away, their screams echoing down the hall after Henry Dawson, the union leader, exposed their theft from the state mine. Rachel, a miner's daughter forged in Black Hollow's hardships, felt the first stirrings of freedom, but the cost her child. Her trust lay heavy on her heart. Henry Dawson stood by her side, his crutches steady despite his crushed leg, his weathered face a mix of fury and resolve. At 52, the union leader was a titan in Black Hollow, his life shaped by the loss of his wife and son to poverty's toll and his battles against coal barons who valued profit over lives. Rachel's sacrifice in the mine had made her his goddaughter, a bond sealed by shared pain. Henry said Logan and Melissa will face the military court, his voice firm but heavy. Stealing from the nation's mine is treason. They'll pay the full price. His words carried the weight of the 1969 strike when miners faced company violence for better wages, a fight Henry had led with unyielding grit. Daniel Ward, the newly appointed safety supervisor, stood near the door, his soldier's frame tense but his dark eyes warm with loyalty. Once Logan's army buddy Daniel had seen his friend's charm curdle into greed, neglecting Rachel for Melissa's allure. Leading the rescue that saved Rachel and Henry had shifted his allegiance, and now he guarded her, his silence a steady promise. The court's got everything, he said, his voice low. Bank records, buyer contracts, and even Melissa's letters begging Logan for more. They're done. Rachel's hands trembled as she clutched the divorce papers she'd presented to Logan, now signed in his scrawled, reluctant hand before his arrest. In her past life, Logan had poisoned her, blaming her for Melissa and her daughter Emily's deaths in a car accident. Reborn, Rachel had saved Henry herself, bypassing Logan's glory, but losing her son in the mine echoed her past tragedy. She was Amos Carter's daughter, raised on tales of survival in a town where coal dust coated dreams. After Amos's death from black lung, she'd worked as a clerk, her dowry spent on bills, while Logan bought Melissa jewelry. His betrayal of Black Hollow, stealing coal to fund Melissa's lavish life, now cuts deeper than his personal betrayal. The military court moved swiftly as it did in 1973, when national resources were at stake. Logan and Melissa were convicted of treason and smuggling, and sentenced to death for their crimes against the state. Their greed had bled the mine, threatening the livelihoods of Black Hollow's miners, who relied on coal to survive the era's economic hardship. Melissa, desperate to escape her abusive past, had pushed Logan to sell coal to foreign buyers, her letters revealing a calculated hunger for wealth. Blinded by love, Logan had complied, believing his position protected him. Their downfall was a public spectacle, the town's gossip mills churning with shock and vindication. Emily, Melissa's 8-year-old daughter, was left adrift. Her earlier malice-wielding lilies to harm Rachel, coached by Logan, faded into fear as her mother was taken. Sent to her biological father, a man who'd never wanted a daughter, Emily was turned away, his cruelty, a mirror of the poverty that defined Black Hollow. The winter of 1973 was brutal. The hills blanketed in snow, and Emily, abandoned and starving, died alone on the streets, her small body a tragic echo of Rachel's own losses. The news reached Rachel in the hospital, a bitter twist of fate that stirred no satisfaction, only sorrow for a child caught in adult sins. Rachel stared at the ceiling, her grief a quiet storm. She'd lost 2 children, her first in her past life to Emily's lilies, her second in the mine to Logan's neglect. Yet Henry's vow and Daniel's presence anchored her. She thought of Amos, who'd taught her to face hardship with grit, his stories of Black Hollow's resilience her guide. Growing up, she'd dreamed of a life beyond the mines, but Logan's heroism had tethered her to him, a love now ashes. "I'm sorry, Rachel," Henry said, his hand on hers, "for your boy, for everything. But you're not alone. You've got us, and you've got a future." She nodded, her voice soft but steady. "I know, Henry. I need time." The divine spark that had reborn her was a call to heal, to rebuild from the ruins of betrayal. Black Hollow's miners, bound by shared struggle, would rally behind her, and Henry's authority ensured her safety. But the scars of loss lingered, and Rachel knew her journey wasn't over. She had to find herself beyond the pain. Spring 1974 bloomed over Black Hollow, West Virginia, the hills shedding their winter frost for a tentative green, starkly contrasting to the coal dust that defined the town. Rachel Carter stood outside her small clapboard house, her body healed from the mine collapse that had taken her unborn son, her heart slowly mending from the betrayals that had scarred her. The year 1973 had been a crucible. Logan Hayes' treachery, Melissa Reed's greed, and Emily's malice had nearly broken her, but a divine spark had reborn her, granting a second chance to rewrite her fate. As the air warmed and the mines hummed with cautious hope, Rachel was ready to embrace a new beginning. The town of Black Hollow was a survivor. Its people were forged in the crucible of coal mining's dangers and economic hardship. The 1969 strike had taught them resilience, and Rachel Amos Carter's daughter embodied that spirit. Her father had raised her on stories of survival, his laughter echoing under the stars as he polished his boots. After his death from black lung, Rachel had worked as a clerk, her dowry spent on a home Logan neglected for Melissa's allure. In her past life, Logan's poison had ended her. Reborn Rachel had saved Henry Dawson, the Union leader, defying Logan's absence and paying with her child's life. Now, with Logan and Melissa executed for treason and Emily gone, Rachel was free. Henry Dawson, her godfather, had become her anchor. At 52, the Union leader was a father figure, his own lost wife and son to poverty's toll mirroring Rachel's pain. He'd ensured Logan's downfall, his authority turning the town against the man who'd stolen from the mine. Henry visited often. His crutches were gone, but his limp reminded him of the collapse. "You're stronger than you know," he told Rachel, his voice warm over coffee in her kitchen. "Black Hollow needs women like you who fight for what's right." His union work, pushing for safer mines in an era when coal barons cut corners, inspired Rachel to look forward. Daniel Ward, now safety supervisor, was a quiet constant. His loyalty, born from leading Rachel's rescue, had grown into respect, perhaps more. A former army buddy of Logan's, Daniel, had seen through his friend's greed, choosing to protect Rachel instead. He helped her repair her house, his calloused hands steady as they fixed a porch step. "You deserve better than what you got," he said one evening, his dark eyes meeting hers. Rachel smiled, not ready for more, but grateful for his presence. Black Hollow's miners, bound by shared hardship, rallied around her, offering food and company, their solidarity a balm after years of Logan's neglect. Rachel's healing was slow but deliberate. She'd lost 2 children, her first to Emily's lilies in her past life, her second to the mine's boulder. The grief lingered a shadow she carried, but she honored it by living. She started teaching literacy classes at the community center, and her clerical skills helped miners' wives read contracts and letters. The work gave her purpose, a way to honor Amos's dream of a life beyond coal dust. With its clapboard houses and weary faces, Black Hollow was changing the Union's push for safety gaining ground as America grappled with energy demands and labor rights in 1974. Melissa's desperation, rooted in her escape from abuse, had fueled her greed, but Rachel felt no hatred, only pity for a woman who'd lost everything. Logan's betrayal, once a knife in her heart, was now a lesson. She'd loved him for his heroism, but his obsession with Melissa had closed his eyes to her worth. Now, standing in her garden, Rachel planted marigolds, their bright petals a defiance of the lilies that had haunted her. The divine spark that reborn her was a call to rebuild, not just survive, and she embraced it, her spirit as resilient as the hills. As spring unfolded, Rachel walked to the mine's edge, the stars above echoing her father's stories. Henry and Daniel joined her, their presence a new family forged in struggle. Black Hollow's future was uncertain, but Rachel was no longer a miner's daughter, defined by loss. She was a woman reborn, her path transparent, her heart open to hope. "This is home," she whispered, the wind carrying her words. The mines would hum, the town would endure, and Rachel would thrive, her new spring a testament to her strength.